Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Compasa. Today we're going to talk about how the United States is going to pretty much plunder Africa from its minerals to support its green revolution, and the Israelis ready to bomb Iranian aid deliveries to Syria. As well as, I thought we can touch upon this story as well. I mean, it was recently. It says Russia and Iran dumped the dollar and bust U.S. sanctions. And we can touch briefly on the not the dissolution, but the disbandment and the collapse of the Mozart Group, a volunteer group that is pretty much a private military company, not a volunteer, but private military company that has been fighting in the Ukraine, right? So, as you know, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and all these people, they talk about a green revolution to save the planet from climate change and so forth. And climate change is a real thing. Obviously we should care about our environment, but a lot of these environmental organizations are fake. I mean, they're not fake per se, but there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of lies that are being told to the public. I mean, a lot of these electrical vehicles that we are running on, that we're driving or whatever. They're actually, the production of these batteries is very bad for the environment, and on top of that, the exploitation of, for instance, Congolese labor is ruthless, right? You got little kids running around in these mining shafts, just picking out, minerals, so so we can have these electrical vehicles. So I thought we can go through it, and this article is from the Gray Zone. So it goes like: U.S.-Africa leaders summit promises more exploitation of Africa, record profits for U.S. mining firms. Recent deals between U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken and African head of state promise eye-popping profits for U.S. mining multinationals and fewer protections for African laborers, toiling in subhuman conditions to drive the digital revolution. U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit held this December in Washington, D.C. provided a platform for the Biden administration to advance its agenda across the African continent, with topics ranging from COVID-19 to climate change to closing the digital divide to strengthening democracy. Washington's agenda united around the belief that African collaboration with U.S. multinational corporations would prove mutually beneficial and advance long-term progress. The weekend of discussions was conducted Davos style, with heads of U.S. industry seated directly beside African heads of state and members of the Biden administration. At the top of the corporate titans' agenda, was the relaxation of regulatory requirements, which they argue would make the continent more inviting for outside investment. So I assume that they're gonna get lower taxes or not pay taxes for I don't know how many years. And this is a common thing that a lot of companies do when they invest in, for example, in many African countries. They come in and they, then maybe they have 5 years to not pay tax, and then taxes, and then after 5 years they just change the name, right? And as far as I know, regarding specifically, for example, Congo, I don't know about Zambia, but the Gray Zone actually had a great live stream with the person that wrote the article. He said that the reason why you can't really hold accountable these Western big corporations, tech giants like Apple and others, and Microsoft and so forth, is because the cobalt goes between like a dozen different middlemen, murky, type of middlemen in smaller companies, and then goes to the main company, and then goes back to another murky middleman, and it goes back and forth like that. So that's why it's kind of hard to track the metals, basically, the cobalt and everything that is necessary to build or to use in electronics and all types of different gadgets and vehicles, right? So one set of regulations that the US would especially like to loosen are those relating to the mining sector. This includes miners' rights, child labor laws, slavery laws, environmental regulations, and mineral tariffs. Deloitte, a US corporate giant and strategic partner of the World Economic Forum, published a paper in 2018, The Future of Mining in Africa, which spells out the agenda Washington is advancing across the continent. The paper argued that facilitating the digital transformation, known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution, would require African nations to loosen mining regulations intended to protect human rights and the environment. The paper lamented that the mining sector continues to experience scrutiny by regulators in Africa, which supposedly creates uncertainty, delayed investment in mining expansion, and stops the development of new mines. Well, this is interesting. I would like to know what these regulations are, because from the videos that I've seen, again in Congo, in the DRC, it doesn't look very regulated to me. I don't know about Zambia. I can't speak for Zambia, but the DRC doesn't have much regulations. And that's what I was trying to tell you guys. Like, the environmental movement, or these environmental NGOs, as they're referred to, their business is not so clean as they're trying to make it seem. Okay? For them, it's like this. If we can plunder Africa of resources to save the planet, right? Then it's worth it, But Africa is not alone in this. I mean, Bolivia experienced a coup in 2020, I think it was, 2020, where Evo Morales was overthrown. And I remember that the stocks, what's the name of that goddamn Tesla stocks skyrocketed, right, in value, and they probably had a hand in the coup. It wouldn't surprise me if they did, because Bolivia has a lot of lithium, which is extremely important in it's an extremely important component in the construction of batteries, right? There we go. And Deloitte went on to argue that Africa needs to move away from enforcing regulatory compliance for compliance sake and move toward delivering value. It was clearly implied that the value would be determined by corporate America and not necessarily the African people. The script put forward by Deloitte helped set the stage for US African Leaders Summit this December. There, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken presented a memorandum of understanding to DRC Foreign Minister Christophe Lutundula and Zambian Foreign Minister Stanley Kakubu. The agreement, according to Blinken, opened the door for US and like-minded investment in the respective countries vast green mineral wealth, referring to massive deposits of nickel, cobalt, and copper. Let's see here. The DRC produces more than 70% of the world's cobalt. Zambia is the world's 6th largest producer, 2nd largest cobalt producer in Africa. 6th largest copper producer, sorry, Blinken said. Global demand for critical minerals is going to skyrocket over the next decades. Electric vehicles help reduce carbon emission, and they support the global response to the climate crisis. The Secretary of State continued, draping the plundering of Africa's wealth in friendly green speak. So back in the day was Christianity, and then there was, the white man's burden, and nowadays we had, nowadays we have democracy, but they also added on the green revolution, or not to be confused with the Gaddafi green revolution, but a green, sort of environmentalist agenda. Now they're using that to plunder nations, and in particular African countries, right? Very cynical, for the fact that these so-called electrical vehicles are not that environmental, considering the production of them. The production of these electrical vehicles releases more carbon dioxide. I think it was more than a diesel car, just for the production of these batteries and so forth. And then you have to add in the transport and all of that as well. Siddhartha Kara, an academic and author of 4 widely praised books exposing the business of human trafficking and slavery in Africa, has spent several years in rural Congo documenting the most hideous and largely hidden abuses of U.S. multinational supply chains and mining operations. Kara remarked to the Grey Zone that the agreements hashed out at the US-Africa Summit will mean more demand for mineral used in electrical vehicles, EVs, leading to more exploitation, abuse, and misery for the women, children, and men who scrounge the world's cobalt out of the dirt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Transnational billionaires aim to control all the world's reserves of key minerals. The US-Africa Summit culminated with an event called the Deal Room, in which leaders of industry announced and celebrated celebrated successful agreements with African nations. Among the corporate executives to appear inside the Deal Room was Cobalt Metals' Josh Goldman. Cobalt Metals is a new tech mining company founded by Microsoft's Bill Gates and backed by Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Virgin's Richard Branson. The company relies on AI, artificial intelligence, and advanced imaging systems to find and mine rare earth minerals deposits that other mining giants have missed. Our job at Cobalt is to invent better ways to find the metals to electrify the world economy: copper, cobalt, nickel, and lithium. We're working to discover deposits that will become the next generation of mines and produce the materials that we need to avoid catastrophic climate change, Goldman said at the event. How many rare earth minerals does this Gates, Bezos, Branson company aim to mine and own? All of them, in fact. The Cobalt website candidly states that the company aims to secure control over all of the world's reserves: nickel, cobalt, lithium, and copper. And then it's a very long article. I'm gonna put it in the description so you guys can read it, but you get the gist of it. how dirty this business is, and how they're trying to, this whole green capitalism bullshit is nothing but a fraud. It's a scam. Greta Thunberg is nothing but a puppet that they put in front to play with people's emotions so they can believe that 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 you can consume, or rather overconsume, because I'm not against consumption. Consumption is what keeps the world going and economies afloat, right? But there's a difference between overconsumption and consumption, right? But hey, so you can consume at least with a good conscience, or overconsume with a good conscience, so to speak. So it's nothing but a scam. Yeah, and I recommend you guys to read this article. I'm going to put it in the description. I thought we can go through another article, and that's regarding Syria, earthquake-shattered Syria, unfortunately. And it's by The Cradle, and it regards Israel. Now, we spoke last time about the drone that hit the Iranian drone manufacturing facilities. If the Ukrainian conflict, there's a huge risk that this can spill over to other countries, right? And after those drones hit those drone making facilities in Iran, the Ukrainian defense minister released a tweet where he said something about, I told you so that this would happen, or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but I'm paraphrasing, right? And the Israelis had pretty much a hand in helping Ukraine to send these drones and sabotage this factory. Now the factory is still working, is still producing drones and so forth, but the attempted sabotage, at least, right? Or the failed sabotage, probably, should we call. And the Ukrainian conflict, there's a risk that this can spread to other countries, which will make it into a World War III scenario, basically. But it goes like this: Israel ready to bomb Iranian aid deliveries to Syria. The warning comes mere weeks after Israeli drones bombed several food trucks crossing from Iraq into Syria. An unnamed Israeli military official told Saudi Arabia's Elaf newspaper on 9th of February that Tel Aviv will not hesitate to bomb Iranian aid deliveries for disaster-struck Syria on their claims that Tehran seeks to take advantage of the tragic situation to send weapons and equipment to Hezbollah. The anonymous official added Israel has intelligence to back up their claims, as the Israeli army has intensified its monitoring by air, land, and sea of everything that Iran is transporting to Syria. Iran has been one of the leading countries providing humanitarian assistance to Syria since a 7.8 magnitude earthquake devastated the country's northwest region. As of Friday morning, the death toll from the quake in Syria had surpassed 3,300 people. As a result of Western sanctions, the aid deliveries for Syria have been largely hindered compared to the flow of aid entering neighboring Turkey, forcing Damascus to rely on allied nations like Russia and Iran to assist survivors. Israel's newest threat comes just 2 weeks after its drones bombed 3 Iranian food trucks loaded with flour and rice as they headed from Iraq into Syria. The trucks were attempting to legally enter Syria through the Al-Bukamal border, crossing days after it was opened for commercial trucks for the first time since 2019. Israel has previously prevented aid from arriving in Syria by bombing the country's airports, using similar claims of weapons deliveries from Iran. In September of last year, the UN Syria Commission decried Israeli strikes on Damascus International Airport, made it impossible for the UN to deliver humanitarian aid to Syrians in need. The attack on 10th of June severely damaged the two runways at Syria's main joint use airport, crippling civilian air traffic in and out of the country. The statement came just days after Israel bombed Aleppo International Airport twice in the same week. Israel regularly carries out illegal airstrikes inside Syria on what it claims to be Iranian or Hezbollah targets. And Russia is turning a blind eye on these Israeli bomb raids in Syria because Russia has a pretty tedious relationship here. I mean, they have a good relationship with Israel's enemies, but also with Israel itself because there's a lot of Russian and Ukrainian Israeli Jews there. However, although Israel claimed to be neutral in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, I remember from Mark Sloboda's video regarding the spillover of the Ukrainian conflict to other countries. He talked about how Israel helps Ukraine, but it doesn't help them with heavy weapons, so to speak. They've been sending, non-lethal aid, but also small arms, right? Here's one article from the Reuters, for instance, that says Israel offers help with air attack alerts. But even prior to, like I said in my previous video, prior to the Russian armed forces entering Ukraine, Israeli weapons companies have been sending weapons to Ukraine, and a lot of them actually ended up in the hands of the Azov Battalion, let's just say a very right-wing extremist group, because I can't really say Nizi here. And the other article I want to talk about is Russia and Iran dumping the dollar and busting US sanctions, right? News of Russian. It's also from the Cradle, and this is by the brilliant Pepe Escobar, who is a great geopolitical analyst. And it says here, news of Russian banks connecting to Iran's financial messaging system strengthens the resistance against US-imposed sanctions on both countries and accelerates global de-dollarization. The agreement between the central banks of Russia and Iran, formally signed on 29th of January, connecting their interbank transfer systems, is a game changer in more ways than one. Technically, from now on, 52 Iranian banks already using SEPAM, Iran's internet bank telecom system, are connecting with 106 banks using SPFS, Russia's equivalent to the Western banking messaging system, SWIFT. Less than a week before the deal, State Duma Chairman Vyacheslav Volodin was in Tehran overseeing the last-minute details, part of a meeting of the Russia-Iran Inter-Parliamentary Commission on Cooperation. He was adamant both nations should quickly increase trade in their own currencies. Ruble-Rial trade, confirming that the share of ruble and rial in mutual settlements already exceeds 60%. Volodin ratified the success of joint use of the Mir and Shetab national payment systems. Not only does this bypass Western sanctions, but it is able to solve issues related to mutually beneficial cooperation and increasing trade. It is quite possible that the ruble will eventually become the main currency in bilateral trade, according to Iran's ambassador in Moscow, Kazem Jalali. Now more than 40% of the trade between our countries is in rubles. Jalali also confirmed, crucially, that Tehran is in favor of the ruble as the main currency and all regional integration mechanisms. He was referring particularly to the Russian-led Eurasian Economic Union, with which Iran is clinching a free trade deal. The SEPAM SPFS agreement starts with a pilot program supervised by Iran's Shahr Bank and Russia's VTB Bank. Other lenders will step in once the pilot program get rid of any possible bugs. The key advantage is that SEPAM and SPFS are immune to US and Western sanctions ruthlessly imposed on Tehran and Moscow. Once the full deal is up and running, all Iranian and Russian banks can be interconnected. It is no wonder that the Global South is paying very close attention. This is likely to become a landmark case in bypassing Belgium-based SWIFT, which is essentially controlled by Washington and on a minor scale the EU. The success of SEPAM SPFS will certainly encourage other bilateral or even multilateral deals between states. Yes, and I'm gonna end it there because, yeah, it's a pretty long article. But as you can see, and as Pepe Escobar wrote, the reason why the Global South is pretty much neutral or maybe even supporting Russia's actions in Ukraine is because this is not a war necessarily between Ukraine and Russia. It's a war between the global West, NATO, versus Russia. Now we're seeing the acceleration of a multipolar world. More and more countries don't want to deal only in the dollar. They want to deal with other currencies. Even America's allies, such as Saudi Arabia, said that they are ready to deal their commodities with different currencies. So yeah, the dollar dominance, which has made sure that America has held its top position or primacy on the planet, is starting to crack. It is starting to dwindle, and other players are emerging from this. So keep a close eye on this event, so to speak. And we can just touch on briefly. This is a New York Times article, about the Mozart Group. As you know, the Mozart Group was a private military army or company that was sort of a response to the Wagner Group, which is a PMC, a Russian PMC, that is fighting in Ukraine as well as in the Central African Republic, Sudan, Venezuela. They're training soldiers in Venezuela. They also exist in Libya, right? Or I don't know if they're still in Libya, but they were active in Libya at least, as well as in Syria. Let's see. So Andrew Milburn is the guy who was the leader of the Mozart Group. He said some pretty interesting comments on a military podcast about how Ukraine is a quote-unquote, well, it's ran by fucked up people, as he said, right? And there's a lot of corruption, he said, and that the Ukrainians are constantly, violating the Geneva Convention because they are killing Russian prisoners of war. And he got a lot of criticism from this. And that's actually one of the reasons why the group is no longer wanted in Ukraine, probably, I would say. But, and the group had, they managed to get money or millions of dollars in donations from private people and companies in the United States. Yeah, there's a lot of details about this in the article, but yeah, there's also infighting between the leadership about, I don't know exactly, let's see here. It says here, okay, after months of struggling to hold itself together, Mozart was plagued by defections, infighting, a break-in at its office headquarters, and a lawsuit filed by the company's chief financial officer, Andrew Bain, seeking the ouster of Milburn. So yeah, there's been probably, you know, infighting regarding the finances. Um, yeah, it seems to be that way. So it's money and pretty much the whole drunken history. The Mozart Group, I heard a lot in the article. They said that a lot of Ukrainian volunteers who wanted to be there couldn't be there because they have to pay a fee to be a part of the group, and a lot of them can't afford it. So yeah, that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to touch briefly on that, and I hope you liked what you've seen. Like the video, like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you get the newest videos out there all the time. And stay safe and stay blessed, everybody. Peace.